Custom decorators are functions that allow you to attach metadata to classes, methods, or parameters, or modify the behavior of route handlers in NestJs. You don't need to copy this part, just watch. I'm going to the dock controller and I will click on a decorator, for example the body, and you can see it is a function. A decorator is just a function, and this body function or decorator gets the body from the request object. So in reality, let me just comment this from the previous lesson because I don't want to get a timeout error. If I came here and did an HTTP request of docs, you can see the age right now is 4. And if I do a patch, is 5. It works, okay? But instead of body, I could actually use request and import it, type it as request from Express, which is what we are using. And then instead of body, I could say request dot body, and I'm going to refresh the server so we get the h4 once again right here. And if I do the patch, h5 works. So you might be thinking, why use body or even param, because I could come here and say params, okay? Why use that instead of just request? And one of the reasons is readability. If you look at here and read body, you already know that this uses the body somehow. But if you read requests, you don't know if it uses the body, the params, or headers, or whatever else. You need to come inside here, and then you realize, oh, it uses the body. So it's just easier to read. But another reason, and there's probably many other reasons, okay, is what goes under the hood. I don't want to go into too much details because this is supposedly a beginner series, but just look at this. If I now put my name, it works. We lost the validation, okay? And what goes under the hood when we do validation is, in reality, this request.body is just a JavaScript object. And we can come here and just try to do this because it won't work. Just trust me, it won't work. I will need to do something that will put my plain JavaScript object into an instance of that update.dto. And there is actually plain to instance, which comes from class transformer, that just does that. I pass in the DTO, so the class that has the validation right here, you see. And then I pass in the request.body, and now I can safely use that DTO. This now works, but we will still not get the error responses. For that, I will need to get the errors, which comes from validate right here, class validator. And then I will need to pass the DTO and also await this. So I will need to async and return a promise. And I will still need to give error messages. And only after all of this will work. If I now try to do it, I get an error. But if I add the h5, I don't. So look how much things I had to do instead of just using the body decorator. And I would like just to add one more thing. Right here, the validate is the same we used in another episode. If I go inside here, the same validate is right here. So let me just Control Z all of this. And now you understand under the hood that the body transforms the JavaScript class to a create.dto instance, then calls validate from validation pipe, and it does all of these under the hood. And I only wrote 2 lines of code for that. 3 if you take into consideration this one. But now you understand why frameworks exist. It's to make our lives easier. And the job of decorator is the same thing, is to make our lives easier. We might need a custom decorator because if I want to come here, I might want to get a user. And that user will come from request.user under the hood, now that you know, okay? But the user decorator doesn't come built in with NestJs. And we certainly don't want to do all of those things I just showed you to get the request.user working, okay? So let's now create a new decorator. I'm going to close this and inside source, create a decorators folder. And the decorator I'm going to create is the user.decorator.ts. And the decorator, you can export it. And this name right here, it will be the name of the decorator. So if I pass in user, I will need to say @user when I use it. And then you need to say create param decorator and import it. Let's pass in the data as unknown. and the context, which we already saw in some other lessons, which is the execution context, and import it. And let's take that, and I hope you already know how to do this. We can get the request from the context dot, and then we switch to HTTP dot, and then we get the request. And now that we have the request, we can return the request dot user. And there we go. We are returning the request dot user in a user decorator. How do we use it? We just need to import it. It doesn't matter where. Let's just say @user and import it. And this user will be of type any. For now, it doesn't matter. Okay, we have the user right here. And let's log the user just so we see what it contains. And if I come here and now do get all docs, we log 5. I'm going to write user like this, just so you see it clearly. If I do the request, we get user 5. Why 5? Because we are using a default value pipe of 5. If I remove this, in reality, we will get undefined because we have nothing in the users. So user undefined, but we are getting something from there. Even if it is undefined or the number 5, we are already using a custom decorator. Really quickly, to make you up to date with what we will do, in a real life application, a user would log in and receive a token in return. This token could have his user ID, a role, or whatever you want. Then, when the client will do some other requests, it will also send the token. And on the other side, for example, a guard will check if the role of that user will meet some condition. For example, is the role of the user an admin? We are now going to do this part with our custom user decorator. Okay, let's add our mock token and put it in the request user. So it's easier, I'm going to use it in the guards, and here after the request, I'm going to create a token and add some information. It can be the user ID. And then let's take the token and we will add it in the request.user. This is giving an error message. We will need to do some things with TypeScript in order to make it work, but let's just remove the types. And the only thing we need to do now is, instead of using the auth header, we actually don't use it anymore. I can comment it. And we will see if it includes request.user.role, which is this one. And there we go. Let's now create a get profile in the auth controller. You might already know how to do this, so just try it by yourself. Pay attention, now we'll take in the user and we can import it. And this user will be of type any, and it will return a string, which can be return. Okay, I just wrote this. Let me put this a bit bigger. Okay, so I am printing the user ID, the username, and the user role from the token that is right here in this controller. I can now come here and let's do a get, and this time it will be /profile, and let's test this. See, user ID 1, username Diogo, role user. If I come here in the auth guard and I say I'm not a user, I'm an admin, for example, let's now test this. Forbidden. But if I come here to the auth controller and say it's actually an admin and save, now it works. So to summarize, and so you can see all the code at once, we created a custom decorator, which is the user decorator that returns the request user. Then we added the mock token that in reality you will get from doing a login and then add it to request.user while doing role authentication, which is this part. And finally, we use the guard for role authentication and use the user decorator to log in user information. We created a custom decorator that extracted data, in our case request.user from there, but we can create another decorators with different purposes. A purpose could be attaching metadata. Think of metadata as data about data. What we are going to do is create a roles user, and then in some way we are going to get the info that is written right here. Let's start. You can create a new file, but I'm going to use the enum file we already have. Since there aren't many lines of code to write this, you need to import the reflector, and all you need to do is create a variable, and this variable will be the name once again of the decorator, and then reflector.create decorator. And that's it. It already works. We can type it. We can say it's an array of user role. And there we go. I can now import it and copy this and paste it here. And it's already working, okay? We already have the decorator created. But now we need to get the data that the decorator roles stores. What I want to do is, instead of authguard having the information right here, it will not have it at all. I can delete this. And it will get the information from here. And how do we do that? Let's go to the authguard. And first, we are not getting allowed roles anymore. We are getting the reflector, which is of type reflector. The same reflector used to create the roles decorator. And here it's not actually reflector.includes. I'll come here a bit later, but for now, the way we get the roles is by getting the reflector, but it's .get. Here you can see that .get retrieves the metadata, which means it retrieves whatever it's inside here, okay, the user role admin. And the first thing you need to pass in the get is the decorator, which is roles. And then in our case, we can pass the context, which I already talked to you about in another lesson, the get handler. Let's also do, if there are no roles, we just return false. So nothing that is after this line will happen. And now we can remove this line. We will still use includes, but we can just do it directly here with roles, because now we get the roles from there, which I already explained. Dot includes request dot user dot role. I'm pretty sure I use, let me search the authguard somewhere else, because yeah, okay, I'm just going to comment this. I don't think I'm using it anywhere else besides here, but it's already written in the correct form, the updated form we did right now. Okay, I think it's working. Let's test it. HTTP. And right now, what are we actually doing? We are saying I can only delete if the role is admin, and it's the use guards that will enforce that rule, okay? And in the auth guard, I have a token with the word admin. So let's do user for now to see if we get an error. This isn't even actually used anymore. I can delete it. Let's test this. Okay, forbidden. And now let's test once again. Then delete, and it worked. No content. So right now, instead of getting the information from an array that was in the auth guard, we actually get information that is stored in a custom decorator. And if you watched all the episodes until now, you already know all the fundamentals about NestJs. Now you can dive even deeper, but we still have just one more tiny lesson talking about the request lifecycle, just so you know about it, and then we are done.